Madera companies, welcome back to Touch Base. This is going to be episode 2 as we continue to walk through season 3 and talk through this conversation of emotional intelligence. I hope that you guys were able to get to see the first episode. This is one of those seasons that's going to be a little bit different than what we've done in the past. There's going to be about 50% conversation about emotional intelligence with different things we talk through, and then about 50% of interviews and us getting a chance to talk to different people about their emotional intelligence and what they kind of navigate and how they struggle with those different things. I want to remind you that there are 5 facets to emotional intelligence, and in this episode, we're going to tackle the very first one. So number 1 is self-awareness. And we're going to talk through that at length here in just a little bit, but then I also want to remind you that coming in the next one is going to be self-regulation, and then we're going to tackle motivation. We're going to hit empathy after that, and then we're going to finish up all of this with a discussion on social skills. And I'm actually really excited about that, especially the interview at the end, because we're going to bring in Dave Gillis, the CEO, and he's actually going to be our interview to kind of bring all this together as we talk through social skills. That said, let's have a little bit of a quick reminder about the definition of emotional intelligence. It is the ability to balance thinking and feeling for great decision making. And so to navigate how we feel about things internally with our hearts and then being able to intellectually walk through it. If you'll remember in the last episode, Daniel Goleman, who's kind of the guy who brought about emotional intelligence kind of into the mainstream, he says that success in life, whether it's in relationships or at work or in any other place, is going to be 20% IQ, 20% intellectual, and then it's going to be 80% emotional intelligence, the ability to navigate how you feel about things, how you feel about what's going on. So let's jump into this conversation of self-awareness. What is it? How do we cultivate it? It is like I said, it's EQ trait number 1. To get there, though, I want to start you with a story. Some of you may recognize this name. It's not necessarily necessary if you don't. But Walt Bettinger, he was the CEO of Charles Schwab for quite a while. And over the last few years, he's begun to tell a story from his past and even really from his college days. And I want to bring you that story as kind of an opportunity for us to begin this conversation on self-awareness. He was in a business strategy course his senior year of college, and he had maintained a 4.0 GPA all the way through school. His final exam for this particular course was coming up, and he'd spent hours memorizing all of the different things, studying everything he needed to study, his formulations and formulas and calculations and all sorts of stuff, right? He gets to the exam, and as he sits down into his chair with all of the rest of the students, there is a piece of paper that's just kind of sitting on his desk. And it kind of surprised him because he expected the test to be longer. I mean, this is a final exam for a college course, right? The professor tells them, go ahead, look at the piece of paper. So they all pick up their pieces of paper and they look at it and they flip it over and notice that the entire thing is blank. The professor said, and this is a quote, "I've taught you everything I can teach you about business in the last 10 weeks, but the most important message, the most important question is this: what is the name of the lady who cleans this building?" And Bettinger sat back and he just thought to himself, I don't know. I didn't even ask. I've seen this lady day in and day out. I know exactly what she does for us. I know exactly how important she is to this business building. And yet I've never asked her name. He'd smiled at her a few different times as they'd passed, but it just wasn't important to him, or at least important enough to him to see her, to learn her name, to see beyond himself. And he, in that moment, was forced to deal with some real self-awareness about what he thought was most important, about what type of person he was, that he saw his own achievements as vital. He saw his own desires and passions about moving beyond college and getting a great job one day as vital. That he even saw the professor as this person who could help him get there, other students as a cohort that could help him get there. But the lady who was responsible for making sure that building was fantastic day in and day out, at that point he never cared to learn her name. And it was at that point he was forced to reconcile with some things about himself and about what he thought was most important. And this kind of sets the tone for this conversation about self-awareness and being open to growing and learning. When we see and understand ourselves clearly, or at least when we go on that journey to see and understand ourselves more clearly, this is the journey of self-awareness. And along the way, great things start to happen for us. We're more confident because, like we talked about in the first episode, we have a better understanding of our strengths, and we're really honest and humble about our weaknesses. We're more creative. The solutions seem to be, even when they're out of the box, but they just kind of jump to us like, hey, we could do this, and this might make things better. We make better decisions. We build stronger relationships, and that makes us more effective communicators. We're less likely to hurt other people. Self-aware people are just better employees. They're willing to grow. They're willing to learn. We call that Kanai here at, the Madera companies. Interestingly enough, self-aware people are more profitable, meaning they make more money, and yet the correlation to this making more money is they're actually even more charitable because self-aware people see others around them, not as just people to be used and to help them get where they want to go, but they see themselves as, I need to be there to help others get where they want to go. And this leads them to a point where, as people, they're just more content. Interestingly enough, the Harvard Business Review makes this statement about their data and all the analytics that they've gathered. But about 80% of our country, the American population, believes they're self-aware. Statistics actually tell us that really only about 15 to 20% of our actual population is really self-aware, which means 80% of us think we are and 80% of us really aren't. And so we need to have a conversation about what is self-awareness and how do we do this? Well, there's two different types of self-awareness. There's an internal self-awareness, right? It's how we see ourselves. It's how we see our own values or our passions, desires, hopes, how we fit into our own environment, how we see our own reactions, which include our thoughts or our feelings, behaviors, strengths and weaknesses, and how we see ourselves impacting others. But there's a second side of this conversation to self-awareness, and it is external self-awareness. And what I mean by that is this. People who are externally self-aware, they understand how others see their values, passions, desires, hopes, and how they fit within their environment. They have an understanding of how others view their reactions, which include their thoughts, feelings, behaviors, strengths, and weaknesses. And people who are externally self-aware also kind of know how others see their impact upon the wider group of people. Both are actually needed. You need both the internal and the external, and yet they're not necessarily related. There are a lot of people out there who probably do a decent job at being internally self-aware. They think about themselves and they think about how they impact others, and maybe they care some or maybe they don't care at all, or who knows. But at the same time, the balance is the external side of being able to say, okay, this is how I see myself, but how do others actually see me? And I should care about that so that I can make a greater impact upon other people. Part of the beauty of being able to have an internal and an external self-awareness is that people who are internally self-aware, they have higher job and relationship satisfaction. They feel more personable for others. They feel like they've got a better control of who they are and kind of where they're going. They have a better feel of the direction they want to go with their life, and they're just relatively more happy. But people who are also externally self-aware, these people are very skilled at showing empathy, which is vital for relationships and for building a life that's about something bigger than yourself. These are people who they listen and they value the perspectives of others, even those perspectives that challenge them or that they might disagree with. Externally self-aware people, they're better in relationships, especially as employees, because they're willing to follow where their supervisor goes. And then at the same time, they can even bring up shortcomings within their department or needs on property or in your office. and yet they do so with respect and for the greater good. They're more satisfied, and just to be honest, they're just more effective at the things they want to do. Inside of this conversation, though, there are, generally speaking, kind of four different types of people. There's people who have high internal self-awareness, but they have that low external self-awareness, like what we're talking about. Like they're clear about who they are, but they don't really challenge their own views. They don't really challenge their own blind spots, and they definitely don't really want feedback from others. And the problem with this is it limits their ability to be successful. It limits their ability to build relationships. There are other people who are low in internal self-awareness, but they're also low in external self-awareness. And these are people who just don't know who they are. They're not quite sure what they stand for. They're not quite sure how others feel about them. Oftentimes they're very self-conscious and they're not really quite sure what to do and how to feel about their performances or their relationships. And they feel a little bit lost about where their life is headed. And maybe some of us who feel this type of way. A third category is called the pleasers. And this is a group of people who are low in internal self-awareness, but they're high in external self-awareness. And what I mean by that is these people that are overly focused on appearing a certain way to others, which means they often overlook what really matters to them. And they'll make choices that are not in their best interest. They'll make choices that do not help them get where they need to go or help their people, help their departments get where they need to go. And they sacrifice higher values in some cases just to be accepted. And then there's the fourth group of people, and this is the group of people that we want to be. These are the self-aware people. We know who we are. We know what we want to accomplish. And we seek out and we value the opinions of others, even those who may criticize us, may challenge us, or disagree with us. And this is where leaders flourish. There's a quote here from Tasha Eurich, and it's going to be on the screen. I want you to see this. Self-awareness is not one truth. It's a balance of two distinct, even competing viewpoints. Now, let me read that again for you because I want you to hear this. Self-awareness is not one truth. It's a balance of two distinct, even competing viewpoints. And what she means by this is that we have to be a people who will embrace the tension, that we'll wrestle with our own personal reflections about who we are, and we will honestly and humbly wrestle with the feedback that we get from others on who we are. This is that, and I talked about this in the first episode, finding those like loving critics, those people who are just in your corner, and yet they can tell you the truth even when it's a hard truth. Because the truth of the matter is, experience does not equal expertise. Highly experienced people, some of you guys have been in this company for years and years and years when it comes to Madera Residential. Some of you have been in the title industry company for years and years and years, and you know this. You can have a lot of experience and still not be an expert. Highly experienced people still need to do their homework. They got to seek differing opinions, and they got to learn new things, and they got to seek different evidence about what's going on for their jobs. They got to question their own assumptions, and they got to learn from and they got to learn with others. And the crazy thing about this is that the more power you gain in your influences, whether at work or in relationships, it can actually lead you to less self-awareness. Powerful leaders often overvalue their own skills and effectiveness and impact. And the higher that a leader rises, the less likely other people are to question them. And you've seen this, right? I mean, the higher you move up the ladder, the truth is that your circle of peers often gets smaller. And there's a lot more people that work under you or for you. And that means that those people, because they're challenging their boss, often struggle to want to challenge and to criticize or to give needed feedback. And so the further you move up the ladder, the more I would just encourage you. You got to find a group of people who can step into your life and really kind of, hey, maybe this isn't as smart as you think it is. And have you thought about this? And be willing to accept that. As we do this self-awareness thing, I want to come back to this balance of certain things. We have to ask ourselves what as much as we ask ourselves why. And here's what I mean by that. Consider a relationship for just a moment, one that you may be having struggles with, whether it's at work or whether it's also maybe it's in your own home. And you ask yourself and you think through, man, why are we fighting so much? And you can spend all day spinning your wheels trying to figure that out. And you can spend all day even coming up with answers. But one of the things you have to do to balance that question, to bring you more objectivity, to bring you future focus, to empower you to act, is to not just ask the why question, but to ask the what question. So it's not just why are we fighting so much, it's what things are we fighting about and what do they have in common? So that you begin to make a plan about how to move past it. Another one would be this, okay, and this happens, right? We're kind of in the middle or finishing up our annual performance reviews. Why did I get this negative evaluation? Well, a big part of this is, and we go back to our first episode with Thomas Keller, asking not just why did I get this negative evaluation, but what do I need to learn from it? And what do I need to do differently in the future so that I don't get this negative evaluation the next time? And so as we kind of close, I just want to wrap it up and give you a few summaries here. Remember, we're here to balance internal and external self-awareness, not just how we feel about ourselves, but being honest and open and willing to learn from how others see us. That we ask for honest feedback, no matter what level of leadership we rise to within our companies. And then third, we balance those why and what questions so that we're not just trying to name the problem, but we're also trying to figure out what is the forward-focused, empowered way to go and solve some of these things and be better people. Hey, this has been the second episode. We're excited to do more, and I'm telling you, you're not going to want to miss the next one because our Chief Marketing Officer, John McNelly, is going to join me for an interview, and it is going to be fantastic. One of my favorite things about John is, I think, a self-aware guy. And he surrounds himself with people that think differently than him, and he's willing to learn from people who are younger, and he's willing to own both his strengths and his weaknesses. And so I hope you'll join us and listen for that, and we'll continue this journey of emotional intelligence. Thanks for being here.